Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. And hello, look who I have. I pointed the right way this time. Welcome to the stream, Riley.
Hello.
I am ClassicSamNYGM, and my guest today is Riley Eliot, and we're going to ask her a bunch of nerdy questions about game mastering and DMing and all this other stuff, and why she moved from D&D to Pathfinder. Problems, and we will see how that questioning goes. Thank you all for coming in. So most DMs and GMs have a catchy name. You went with your own name. Why did you not do like something like, catchy?
So like the first problem is that the username I use across the board is the LaughingHound, but it won't fit in 98% of the social media.
Yes.
And so I have to get creative. On most of my sites, it is the LaughingHound, but on TikTok, because I was using it also to like interact with people I knew, I just put the two names I use the most there. But if you go to my page, it shows like a slightly different handle.
Okay, gotcha.
But like the LaughingHound is a mouthful, and so Riley or Eliot is much easier.
It's much easier. Well, that makes sense. What is, you're all over TikTok. That's where I found you. That's where I kind of interacted with your page. You have like around 12,000 followers on TikTok and growing. Yeah. How is it different from, I don't know if you're here on Twitch, but how is it different from Instagram and the other social medias that you're on?
So for me specifically, TikTok it's easier to post there than like Instagram or Twitter, just because while Twitter is technically stream of conscious, you kind of have to it's easier for me to take the phone out, record it, and just respond with whatever's on my mind than say Instagram, which is kind of more photo based, and I don't take a whole lot of photos.
Okay.
I do have an account. It does have photos on it. They I don't know. The way that TikTok interacts is a little bit different because you can still have a decent reach and never use a hashtag.
Right.
It's just all about getting the engagement in your comment section.
Right.
And that I don't know. It's the only social media that really clicked for me.
Oh, okay.
So it just the fact that I can pull my phone up, I don't have to do a whole lot of editing outside of the app. It feels better.
Right. So, do you are you here on Twitch? Are you do you plan on branching out further, or you just want to remain on TikTok mostly?
So I have social media accounts basically on everything. I have a Facebook account for my page. I have a Twitch. I have Twitter. I have Instagram. I just don't use them. So they're more like placeholders in case I want to do anything with them. But really, over the past year, I've been really thinking about what I want to do. And it's just the more I think about it, the more I'm just kind of fine interacting on TikTok and making the content there.
So TTRPGs, specifically D&D and Pathfinder and all the other Call of Cthulhu, all those, it's very, very niche. It's like a niche thing. Why did you choose that as your social media outlet as opposed to something political or something actoring or entertaining like that?
So it was never honestly my intent. I didn't really think that there was a space for that, especially on TikTok. I downloaded TikTok because a friend at work said, I think you'd like this app, download it.
Really?
And then I did. And then I started to see that there were people talking about tabletop games and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, I like tabletop games. I have something to say. And so I originally started talking about Curse of Strahd, and that gained a lot of traction.
Ooh, okay.
And then from there, just the people that I've met, and then continued. So I make a mutual out of somebody, I get recommended their mutuals, and so on and so forth. And so it was never my intent. It just kind of happened.
Okay.
And so I was just happy to find something I like talking about. It was never the intent, never my goal to make videos. It just, somebody said something one day in a TikTok video, and I went, I have something to say about that.
What are they talking about? Welcome to the chat, Shiv. So, what are you talking about? But I was kind of going over your stuff and going through your TikToks, looking over a lot of stuff, and you have a section called D&D to Pathfinder. First, why did you leave D and not leave, but why D&D to Pathfinder? I'm just saying, for me,
So my own move from D&D to Pathfinder was when second edition was in its early playtesting phases. Our personal play group, my GM was like, "Yo, check out these rules. It fixes all the problems you have with 5e, all of the holes you don't like. The rules reference is amazing." And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't like reading." And he was like, "Trust and believe." And so we did some playtesting, and the 3-action economy was perfect. I loved it. And so we made the switch just as our own game because we liked the system. It was streamlined like 5th edition, but it had so clear rules and how it worked. There were no holes, no GM guessing. If you wanted an answer, you could find it.
Fine.
When the OGL debacle happened,
yes,
a lot of people on TikTok were like, "Where do we go? What do we play? I want something like that." And I was like, well, before you pick up Pathfinder 2nd edition, let me set some expectations. And that's how that playlist came to be, was because people were asking me, because even though I was talking about D&D, most of my mutuals knew I wasn't playing it.
Right.
And so they would come to me and be like, "Hey, how do I play? What are the expectations?" And that's why I started making that playlist.
Gotcha.
If you want to, here's a playlist to get you from D&D to 5e.
Okay, that's awesome. That makes sense. I mean, I watched some of them. I'm not gonna be swayed. I will not be swayed.
Oh, I mean, it doesn't help that I didn't finish them. There's one that's all right, we got halfway through making a character. I have a limit of 2 minutes, so I'll make another, and then I never made it.
You never made another.
I think the video following that was, guys, if you really want to switch to Pathfinder, check out the Rules Lawyer on YouTube. He's the guy.
Right. He is the guy. Welcome, Twin. Hi, people. So, how did you discover D&D? How do you sort of discover TTRPGs in general?
So my parents played.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's
my
unusual.
parents played, and it's everybody's like, "What? You got to grow up with this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, We had my mom had a whole friend group. My mom and dad had a whole friend group that had kids, and so they would have the quote unquote adult game.
Oh wow.
In which they were like, "You guys go play in the room," and then they took out their adult entertainment, and then proceeded to play Dungeons and Dragons. And then we would all be like, "Man, we want to play Dungeons and Dragons," and they're like, I can't read this book. I'm 8 years old." And so what would happen is the GM for that would then run the kid game.
Okay.
Which happened far and few between. It was basically when he had to babysit, because we were raised in a village type situation, so he'd collect all 6 kids and run a D&D game for him, and that happened until we were adults.
Oh wow.
We would, even after the parents kind of fell out, the kids still remained friends, and we would still go to his house and play Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I grew up playing it, and so I've played every edition.
Oh wow. So from advanced D&D to 2.0 to all the way 3.5, even the 4E debacle.
Yes. Even the only thing I haven't played is a first edition pure, because we played a combination of first and advanced.
Okay.
And the starter box. Everything else I've played at least 3 times.
Right. Okay, that's awesome. So at one point you had to go from player to DM. How did you make that switch?
So I was, at some point I stopped playing with the original group that I was playing, grew apart, and then I joined a new group, and became very good friends with that group, and that DM was like, "I really want to run, or I really want to be a player. I think you'd make a great GM. I'd really like to play in Curse of Strahd." And I went, "Let me read Curse of Strahd and get back to you." And I have run that 4 times for that same GM.
Nice.
And our collective groups. And so it just was, my GM went, "I want to take a break and I want to be a player." And I went, "I got you."
So that's how the transition happened. So
yeah.
During that point, was there ever a moment where from your games that always made you quit?
Not there hasn't been a moment where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. Life stuff happens.
Okay.
And has put DMing on the back burner just because scheduling issues and stuff like that. The closest thing was I was in a play group, and the GM he wasn't a bad GM.
Mm-hmm.
He just was really bad at setting expectations, and
Okay.
I was going in with one expectation, and when I realized that wasn't it, I just said, "Hey, this is not for me."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "So I'm not gonna play in your game anymore." And it was very amicable. He went, "Oh, I understand. Power
Mm-hmm.
play is not everybody's,
Right,
fantasy, and
right.
that's fine." And that's like the closest, but there's never been a moment where it's like, I don't ever play TTRPGs again. I don't want to DM again. It just life happens, and so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we take a break. But there's never been that moment of like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
I get it. I get it. So, um, have you what has how's the transition, and do you find that you cannot play as often as you like once you started DMing? How was that transition of not being able to play as much?
Honestly, it wasn't too much of a problem because, like I said, I started running games for my DM, and so
Mm-hmm.
we ran two tandem games.
Okay.
And so I honestly haven't had too much of a problem because, as with this, because I still get to be a player because he runs one game and then I run another game. And we
Oh.
did that up until they moved.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but he's now still running another game. We just play online now.
Okay.
Our schedules don't allow me to run for them as often. I'd have to run the game on the day we play, and so,
Mm-hmm.
but we've
So,
already got two alternating games on that day.
so that's a lot. It seems like
Hmm. Yeah,
uh,
it is a lot.
it's a lot. TTRPGs are like slowly, very slowly, but definitely happening, growing a large following on TikTok and specifically YouTube, and here on Twitch as well. Do you plan on streaming on Twitch and letting your expertise and knowledge here, or on YouTube or any other platform?
I've thought about running Twitch GM sessions where I just stream me getting ready for games or
Mm-hmm.
like answering people's questions.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that I don't particularly want to. It just I don't it the sitting I don't know, it just the getting the gumption to sit down
Mm-hmm.
and wait for the chat to fill because I know I have 12K followers, but I've tried moving that follower to different locations and like four people will move. Like
Yeah.
four mutuals that I have are like, I got your back wherever you go.
Right.
And like thanks to those guys, but I get it. I
Mm-hmm.
also am like hard pressed to move to a different social media site when my friends are like, "Hey, I'm not they're deleting TikTok, so I'm gonna go on YouTube," and I'm like, I have to open another app. And so I don't blame them. And so it's just it's the getting past the hurdle of
Mm-hmm.
getting followers there. If I had the same amount of engagement that I did on TikTok on Twitch or YouTube, yeah. But it for TikTok it's so easy. It's
Yeah.
pull a video out, post a video, and I'm done in like 30 minutes. With Twitch, I gotta set up OBS. I have to do all these things. I
Mm-hmm.
have to advertise it. I have to do these things. I can't just do it and then set it down and forget it. And so
Right.
it's maybe one day, but not this year.
Okay, okay. So, do you ever think that social media content creation will be your full time endeavor, like your full time job?
If you had asked me that 2 years ago, I would have said yes. 2 years
Mm.
ago, I actually made the jump from like 2,000 followers up to 10K with
Mm-hmm.
like 3 viral videos and like got a like sponsored deal. And I was like, oh, this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had also just got a new job in a local game shop, and so I had more time on my hands. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is happening. But within like 9 months, TikTok's algorithm changed. The videos that were making me money weren't getting traction anymore, and I was like, oh, this is this is not fun.
This is hard.
This is hard.
Yeah.
And so when I took a break and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, just making videos just for the sake of making videos is more fun.
Right.
And when I focus on trying to make it a job and having to live off of it, I got stressed out. And so I just went back to like, if I get 200 views, I get 200 views. If I
Mm-hmm.
get a 10K views, I get 10K views. I'm just
Right.
going to make what I want.
Okay. I think that's the mindset that needs to happen, because a lot of times people kind of just, especially content creators, look at their views and like, it's only 200 views, and it's
Mhm.
weird. So, because 200 views here on Twitch is like, holy crap.
Is like, holy, yeah.
Yeah, 200 views on TikTok, you're like, like this, that hurts my
Yeah.
spirit. You offer commissioned works as a game master
Mhm.
assistance. Um, How did you decide to do that and make that type of creation shop?
So in tandem to that viral video
Mm-hmm.
was because what it was is that it pretty much comes that back to that viral video that I made. That was me drawing random cards out of a deck I have
Mm-hmm.
called Adventures Tarot, and I
Okay.
would just be like, I would sort them and be like, your character class is a ranger with an attachment to fire, and you have an ally or something, and
Mm-hmm.
people loved it, and I was like, they're asking me, and so I had to figure out how I
Mm-hmm.
could provide the requests. And while I was doing that, I was like, oh, people also occasionally ask me for help. So I went ahead and made a coffee shop,
Mm-hmm.
mostly for the requests. But I was like, while I'm at it, let me go ahead and put in like the option for like paid GM assistance. If anybody, if somebody, people have asked, and I've been like, yeah, you can go here and fill out a form. And most of the time they go, I wanted it for free. And I was like,
No. Mm-mm.
you gotta pay.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, you also offer like a lesson plan type of
Mhm.
plug and play TTRPG bundle. That's a unique marketing tool. How did that come about, and did you write that bundle?
So the lesson plan came about was because I work for a local game shop, and my
Mm-hmm.
boss was like, "Hey, if I pay you, can you teach people how to play Dungeons and Dragons?" I was like, "Sure." And knowing myself, I went to college very briefly for education. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"I need a plan
Right.
to do this," and so I created it. And I was like, "Well, people often go into Facebook groups and stuff, going, 'Hey, I have to teach my 6-year-old, my cousin, my whatever at young age groups how to play.'" And I was like, "Well, I want to put it somewhere where they can easily download it." So that's
Mm-hmm.
why that's there. The bundle is also a leftover from when I thought I was gonna turn this into a career of
Mm-hmm.
like one of the things I need as a GM is being able to just take a prompt.
Right.
Like a dryad is trying to save the forest from an evil thing, and so it's setting it on fire. And being able to just plug that into wherever I need to in the campaign. And I was like, well, I have a bunch of these that I've already made. Let me share them with other people. And so that's how those two things came about.
That's awesome. I like that. I like the idea of the plug and play. It makes
Hmm.
sense. On TikTok, so I want to go back to TikTok a little bit
Yeah.
because on TikTok, there have been several DMs. One in particular, who I will not name, that have had some bad takes on
Hmm.
DMing, from wanting to control their players' emotional role playing to purposely fudging dice behind the screen without telling their players, despite please name them, despite their players not wanting that, or disregarding what their players want from session zero and just doing
Hmm.
their own thing. What is your take on what is happening, and do you believe that this is just an age old TTRPG culture?
I do think that it is carryover from like the age old, like the quote unquote grognard era
Mm-hmm.
of TTRPGs. And I don't necessarily think a lot of these GMs intend ill will with it. They
Mm-hmm.
just know that it's something they're doing at their tables that works for their tables. And because it works for their tables, they don't necessarily realize that n- disregarding or even not asking the players on like how they feel about these things is they don't see that it's bad because it's
Mm-hmm.
never been a problem at their
Right.
table. But I do think it is just carryover from an old like way of running, because most of us probably learned from those people. I know I did. I
Mm-hmm.
know I learned from somebody who had a very similar like play style. Is like he did what he wanted. He never like he did what like he had the DM screen. He was the type of GM who would, if you were talking too much or being too distracting, he'd be like, a lightning comes out of the sky and strikes you for 2 damage.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, like if I were to talk about my old games, everybody would be like, "That's a horror story," and I'm like, "But
Yeah.
I was a teenager. I was having fun. Looking back, it's like I had fun. I can see the problems with it, but
Right.
if I was having fun, I can see other people looking back and not making that extra leap of going, I had fun, so it's not a problem," rather than, despite the fact that it was a problem, I still had fun.
Right. Right.
And so I really just think it's that. I just think it's people who don't want to be wrong and are
Mm-hmm.
doing something that they've always done.
Right. Okay. So, what do you think about DMs or GMs deciding to essentially role play for their players? Uh, does the one, do you think it takes away
Hmm.
from the player's experience, and two, do you think GMs do it because they want to be players?
Um, I don't think most GMs do it because they want to be players. And again, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think most GMs who are doing this are doing it with ill intent.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch Critical Role, Matt does it for his character, for his players all the time. He'll mention like you're sweating, you feel scared. These are normal things that you see in actual plays. And so for the most part, I don't think it's a problem. I only think it's a problem when a player has been like, "Hey, I don't want that from
Right,
our
right,
play style." And then with almost everything, that's when it becomes a problem, when
right.
you insist on it, when you persist. But I think just we the skill of trying to invoke emotions is hard
Yes.
because even if you're using descriptive language, how somebody interprets that descriptive language may not be the way that you intended. And so, like, if I'm running Curse of Strahd, I set a blanket expectation of, like, my goal is to scare you. I want you to play a character who can be scared. How they react to that
Mm-hmm.
scared is up to you, but they need to be capable of being afraid.
Right, right.
And so when I say you are afraid in a Curse Strahd campaign, it's something I've set the expectation for. So I don't think it's a problem. I just think it's a problem when GMs do it and just do it despite the players are like, I don't necessarily want that out of the game, you know?
Right, right. So how much off of that then? How much control do you think a DM or GM should have in games over their players, if at all?
That's dependent entirely on the system. There are some
Mm-hmm.
systems that's part of the play, and then other systems that the GMs literally roll nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or GM-less systems. And so that I think is purely down to the system.
Right.
Um, when it comes to something like that. Because like in Pathfinder 2nd edition, there's kind of like this kind of give and take with how successes work, is that the system more often than not will tell you what your success or failure looks like,
Right.
not the GM. And so the system has a lot more control over what your character is doing and what the results of the die look like. Whereas in D&D 5e, that is all on the GM. The GM goes, yes, you succeeded, and it's up to between the GM and the player to decide what that looks like. And often the GM does. And so I really think it just comes down to the system.
Okay. Okay. In D&D, Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, all these things are very much fantasy, old school based type of games. How hard or how difficult is it for players who are much more used to 5e and Pathfinder to move over to games like Cyberpunk or more modern settings?
Mm-hmm. Um, it really comes down to why they're moving.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times I've found when trying to teach people a system that isn't 5e and that's something that they've only played, is that they have this disconnect
Yeah.
because of how loosey goosey the rules are. You're like, oh, I want to like stealth. You just roll a stealth check, and
Yeah.
it's like, well, in this system I have this 8-page rule if
Yeah.
you have to abide by. And then they go 8 pages, and I go, yeah. I think a lot of people find it intimidating and that it's really hard to leave their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if they're willing to go in with like a clean slate, new expectation setting of like, this is not going to be D&D.
Right.
I'm not looking for a D&D experience. I think they can have a lot of fun, and then it just comes down to how easily they pick up rules. But if they're not like being honest with themselves and are looking for a D&D experience but in space,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to go well.
Right, right. WotC, and yeah, see, every time I say WotC, people go. So WotC's latest misstep, and for people who don't know, obviously they should, Wizards of the Coast, is their redesign of their D&D Beyond marketplace, where they have gotten rid of the a la carte system. So before, you used to be able to pick a character that you wanted to play or a class that you wanted to play that wasn't available. You didn't have to buy the entire book,
Right.
wherever it was. They've gotten rid of that and said, you can't do that anymore. Buy the entire book. And furthermore, if you did do that before, you still got to buy the entire book.
Right.
You get no discount. What is your opinion of this new money grab, and your opinion of gaming companies' insistence on making it harder for consumers to access the games that they love?
So I'm super spoiled because, again, I play Pathfinder 2nd edition, and they've teamed up with multiple like different individuals who through pure donations from the community, make all the rules free and available.
Okay.
And so like, while Paizo does have instances in which on like Roll20 on Nexus you do have to buy the books, they do deals where if you have the PDF and all of this stuff you get discounts. And so like I'm seeing a company who's just as big, if not, or not as big, but as popular as Wizards of the Coast, do this in a way that like isn't, they're like, yes, we still have to make money off of this, but we're going to make it as easy as possible. And so to see Wizards of the Coast do this, and it's like, that's what it is. It's a clear money grab.
Right.
Almost all other systems have not like just the SRD free available, but like at least the core rules available for purchase. And like, and that's honestly, I think the problem I had with it most is that there are no PDFs available for D&D books. You can only get them through D&D Beyond or like a virtual tabletop. And so it's frustrating to see the biggest role-playing game do this and make it harder and accessible, because that was the big draw for most people, is how accessible it is. And that is slowly being taken away.
Yes.
And it's like, I know that they don't have to do it this way. They are just choosing to.
Right. Okay. They've also done this whole thing with 1D&D. And although some of the things that they've done seems to be okay in fixing 5e, they have also, in an attempt to, in my opinion, to make it more inclusive, they've changed a lot of the rules that are not great. Like, they changed the feat imbalance, they've changed the 3-spell share list, all these other things. It seems to be less cohesive than what people expect, and it seems to be in the vein of what 4E did. Do you agree with the direction that they've gone in, and what, if any, mistake have they made? If you were in charge, what would you have done differently?
As somebody who actually enjoyed 4E, I don't mind the direction. And a lot of the stuff they're doing honestly is very reminiscent of the things that Paizo did with Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And so I think it is mechanically, the way things are going for the most part is like the right direction. I just think the way that it's going, the fact that it's coming off the heels of the OGS, the fact that people already have a hard time switching off of systems. I think they literally just today announced that the name of it, this could be completely wrong, was like 5.2 or something.
Really?
I think so. I can't, don't quote me on that, guys. But like the weirdness of it being, because they have confirmed it's not necessarily a new system. I'm sorry if you can hear my birds.
That's okay. My cat's in here, so.
They hear me talking and they're like, we would like to join. But the idea that it's not necessarily a new system, but a revamp of 5, but clearly there's a lot that are, it's not a clear-cut transition like a new edition, and it's not a smooth transition like an update.
Right.
And so I would have, if I was in charge, I would have picked one or the other. I would have either made, we're going to 6th edition, guys, let's go, or we are just updating the rules. We're fixing some wordings, and clarifying some rules.
Okay.
That's what I would have done. Picked one or the other, not this weird in-between stuff.
Do you think the weird in-between stuff is because I think it's them, they've recently switched out their CEO, and I don't think they have picked a new one yet, but do you think the change in the guard, per se, is the reason why all these different things are happening?
Honestly, I don't think the CEO leaving had too much to do with this, like, in-between, because it was there before she took over, and it's there when she leaves. I think that has more to do with, like, honestly, the overall, like, just nature of the company trying to find this way to make as much off, because they know they've been through this. It happened with 4th edition.
Yes.
That when they move away, they're going to lose a lot of money.
Yes.
Because that happens with every edition, and I think they're trying their hardest to avoid that while appeasing the need for a new system.
Okay.
And I don't think it's working.
Yeah, it's not working. I don't think it's working as well. The OGL debacle. They pulled back really hard when people started like, well, we're just not going to use your system. We'll homebrew and never use 5e again. Do you think that with them putting out these different rules and changing their marketplace, that they will revisit the whole thing with the OGL and try to sneak it in?
Last I heard, with they moved the OGL to Creative Commons, and so as far as I know, they can't take that back.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they're not going to make a new updated document, and so if they do, I don't think it will come with an official new system, will come with a new document. I do not think it'll be in this edition's live. I don't think that they would make that mistake again. However, I would not be shocked if they tried, especially with the existence of the ORC or the ORC from like Paizo and a bunch of other games who made their own creative license.
Right. WizKids. So I have opinions about minis. I have opinions about the miniature market. But WizKids offers what's essentially gambling, a mystery block. What do you think of the miniature market, specifically them, and how they offer their minis?
I can tell you from a store point of view that when people come into my store that I work at to buy minis, they're looking for specific minis.
Right.
And the blind boxes are playing off of that. The blind box, the feeling, the same reason I buy like card packs. It's like, I'm gonna get that thing, and I know it's itching that little piece in the back of my brain that I don't need to spend money on, and so it is definitely playing off of that. They are pre-painted minis, and so I think that's really the big draw. I'm gonna be honest, as somebody who paints miniatures, I could do better.
Yeah, see, Miss says, their paint job is not the greatest.
It's not the greatest. But I understand the draw that people have toward them. I'm honestly just kind of impartial, just because at my table I don't use minis. I make tokens because I don't like when I'm playing tabletop games, like. For role-playing games, I have shelves full of miniatures, and I'm like, I don't like miniatures.
As you see the line of behind you.
For tabletop role-playing games specifically, I prefer to use tokens, just because for me they're easier to move around. And so I'd never really bought into miniatures, and so like they don't sell as well in the store, the blind backs, because almost everybody's coming in looking for a specific one.
Okay. So. In answer in way to move into the next question, mini collector or dice collector?
If you had asked this 3 years ago, dice collector. I've moved to transition on to miniatures. I play multiple different war games now. I also, I don't know if you can see, I also have a bunch of Magic cards as well. So
yes, I see.
A lot. All of the dice are currently in the garage, which we're going to try to turn into like a gaming space, which is why they're out there. But because we online play, I don't have a need. Like there are dice up here, but mostly miniatures now.
Okay. As an experienced DM, what advice would you give someone transitioning from player to DM?
There's the obvious ones like, oh yeah, talk to your players, have a conversation. But the really big one is you're gonna have to be okay messing up. You're going to have to be okay reading a stat block wrong, or misunderstanding a player, or explaining something incorrectly and them misunderstanding you. Because if you can't get past that, when it happens, you're gonna feel terrible. You're gonna not want to do this anymore, and you're gonna think that because when the players are on the experiencing side, or at least for me, I didn't realize these things were happening to my GM.
Okay.
Except for like the misunderstanding stuff, but like I didn't read this right, or I misplaced this, or I totally forgot about this NPC. Oh, this major NPC was supposed to live and now they're dead. As a player, I never saw any of that. So when I experienced it I was like, I am the worst at this. I don't know what I'm doing. But luckily, because I was running for my GM and the way that we end our games, the conversations always went with like, I'd like voice my concerns, and he's like, guess what? That happens all the time. And I'm like, what, really? He's like, all the time. I'm like,
all the time.
So this is normal.
Yes.
And so as long as you're okay with imperfection, you'll be fine.
Yeah. So that's 100% true, because on a regular basis, even the last game I played online here, I was just like, what is happening? But in my head, I was like, that was awful. Everyone was like, they had a great time. That's really all that matters.
Yeah, you're like, oh my god, this is the worst. And they're all like, yeah. And you're just like, what?
What? Exactly. what is the balance then between prepping knowledge and
Mhm.
actually winging it? Because I've at times walked
Mhm.
into a game that I've been hired for with no prep and just pretty much going, okay, this is what we're doing, and winged it. So, what's the balance there?
Uh, for me personally, I've tried all of them of like prepping to the nines,
Mm-hmm.
sheets and sheets and sheets, and like notes and notes and notes, and like I have an app called Obsidian, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just full. And then I've also run with literally just one line of like bandits, maybe.
Maybe.
And I find that like somewhere in the middle of doing a lot of front loading in like the world of knowing like what are the major goals of like the city, the people
Mm-hmm.
that the characters are going to interact with, and then like a couple things that they might want to do, and then like a couple monster stat blocks on the side is like the perfect amount for me because then from there I can improv of the knowledge I have done, and that is my sweet spot.
Okay.
I
Okay.
like knowing the world, whether that world is a small hamlet or a city or a
Mm-hmm.
coastline or a realm of dread.
Okay.
Once I know the world, I can run Curse of Strahd impromptu with just stat blocks because
Okay.
I know it so well in the back of my head. I
Mm-hmm.
can improv that without any prep,
Okay. Okay.
but I shouldn't, and so I should prep. And so like that middle line, that like having some bullet notes and some if this then this, or
Mm-hmm.
um like just in some stat blocks in my pocket, maybe a name generator
Right. Right.
pulled up in another tab, I'm good to go.
Good to go. Okay. So then, what is your favorite setting then? Homebrew or modules? Because you said Curse of Strahd a lot. So which one do you prefer?
So I really like Curse of Strahd, but I think I
Mm-hmm.
like Curse of Strahd because of the nostalgia of it,
Okay.
and what I did with it.
Okay.
I so much about it. I changed things that are not emphasized in the book. I emphasized, and like my favorite character is Irina, but the things I like about Irina are not in the book. And
Mm.
so honestly, it's a homebrew world. So
Right.
like the I guess canon to my settings, like Ravenloft
Mm-hmm.
is my such my favorite setting that I've tried replicating it with it not being attached. And
Okay.
so like I really like Curse of Strahd. There are a lot of problems with it. And so I've tried to make my own version of it that
Okay.
has that same vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And so like gothic horror homebrew setting is like I guess my favorite, with a like second guess to the Dreadlord
Right.
Strahd back there.
So, as a non-binary person,
Mhm.
what obstacles have you encountered at earlier tables when you started DMing professionally?
Honestly, because the non-binariness is like late game stuff for
Mm-hmm.
me. It's like within the last couple years, and honestly, if I don't, people are like, "What's your pronouns?" And I'm like, "Don't ask me that. It's an H. Just go ahead." Uh, the honest truth though is because I'm the GM and I
Mm-hmm.
introduce myself. I go, "My name is Elliot or Riley, depending on where I'm running it," and I will say I use any pronouns. That's it. That's the end of the conversation
Okay.
because I'm running it in my store.
Gotcha.
I am the GM and I have set this expectation of pronouns. No one has yet to be like, excuse me. And I'm like, you don't like it, please leave.
Yes. Yes.
And so it really hasn't been a problem because I'm in the position, like, I'm in the position of power because the GM seat is a position of power and it's how we use it.
Mm.
And I've gotten like like an uncomfortable, like, oh my God, do I say my pronouns now? Most of the time, the people who aren't going to say the pronouns, they're going to say it. But I have seen the joy it brings into other people's faces when they're like, "Oh my God, it's safe here." It hasn't been a problem,
Oh,
honestly.
that's awesome.
Like at most a weird look, but they know that like, oh, I paid for this.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose my money.
Like, there's no refunds. What do I do?
And then, honestly, by the end of it, they've forgotten it and they've had a good time.
That's
So.
awesome. That's awesome. When when there's a old type of player, usually it's you don't usually encounter them too often nowadays, but they're the well actually player.
Mhm.
Have you had that at your table, and how do you deal with the well actually it's a D6 not a D4? How do you deal with that?
Surprise, I'm that player. So I jokingly, I do it much more tactfully than going, actually, but like that's kind of the role that I play in the tables that I'm at with my friends, is that if there's a rule call, or if there's something funky with the rules, that's my job. I'm supposed to call it, hey guys, this is how this actually works. So the way I deal with it at my table though, is that typically I have someone fill the same role.
Okay.
And so when I'm playing with my friends, I have someone designated to go, that's not how that works.
Okay.
When I'm running games for the store, I set an expectation. Hey guys, we're doing rules as written. If I misremember something from your character sheet, go ahead and correct me. But if it's pertaining to anybody else's character sheet, just go, let it roll. We're here. We've only got 3 hours now.
Right.
So it really doesn't come up. But
Okay.
the way that I prevent it most of the time is I designate one person. Your job is to correct me on rules.
Right.
Or to look up a rule while I'm doing something else if somebody has a question.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that. I like that idea, having someone like a designated person to look up the rules.
It really fixes it if somebody is like wanting to correct rules, because I feel like most problematic things are not a problem if you facilitate it. And so if you have somebody who wants to correct rules, give them the power to correct rules. And obviously if they use it for bad, then you're like, don't be at our table.
Right.
But if they use it for good, that's another thing that I don't have to worry about.
I'm stealing that. That's a great idea. I love that. What regrets, if any, or mistakes, if any, have you had as a DM and as a player?
I think I don't hold a lot of regret in myself. Like, if I stopped doing something or something went poorly, I do my best to learn from it. And so a lot of it is I wouldn't be where I am or playing with who I play with or the characters I play with if I didn't make those mistakes. And so there's not a whole lot of regret that I hold in myself. There are times when I'm like, I wish I could go about this differently, or I could hold this conversation differently. Like, even in long time, I've been playing with the same group for almost 8 years now, and there have been blowouts, there have been fights, and it's like, man, I wish I could go back and do those differently to avoid those things. But like that at most, like, I maybe avoid a little bit of cringe so I don't look back and go, ooh, that ooh. But like, it has to be like that, so future me has to be okay with that. It's part of me, I think my biggest one would be I wish I was better at self-reflection earlier on in life.
Okay.
Rather than like, because it's taken me several years to be able to be okay with being incorrect and being wrong and being corrected. Previously, like, if you had talked to me like 6 years ago, I'd be like, oh yeah, the GM can do whatever they want. That's reasonable. They don't need to consent checklist. Who's ever heard of
what
that?
What is a consent?
And and it's not that I wish I knew those things then, it's just I wish I was better at self-reflection. Because maybe I would have made that growth faster than I did. And maybe games wouldn't have ended, or I could have helped prevented us from doing something that ended up not being fun. But honestly, I don't hold a lot of regret in myself. I don't think it's healthy to dwell on it. To be like, what did I learn from it? Okay, what can I do better next time?
So you're in a unique position because you work in a gaming store, essentially. So you're in a unique position to see all the new TTRPGs and all these new systems coming out. How has that made you a better game master and GM?
So previously, before I had worked there, the store only carried D&D.
Oh, really?
And like 2 Pathfinder books. And then the free RPG day rolled up, and I was like, are we doing this? And they're like, oh, that's a thing? And I'm like, yes, that's a thing. And then he was like, oh. And so we carry more now because I've been pretty active in pushing it. But what it does for me is that because we carry more stuff, I end up talking to people that I wouldn't otherwise talk to. Like, I've talked to freelancers for Modifius, who does the Fallout and Dune games.
Oh, wow.
That was really cool. But like, for the most part, I talk to people and I just hear their interpretation of games differently, or why they continue to play 5th edition, or what they're looking for when they're looking to move away from 5th edition. And so it makes me a better GM just because I'm talking to people constantly about what they're playing, why they're playing it. And then I can then take that back and apply it to my own games and ask my own questions of like, hey guys, I talked about this in the store today. What do you guys think about this?
Okay.
It's the same reason I make TikToks. It's the same thing.
Well, speaking of TikToks, when you first started making TikToks and putting yourself in front of the camera, did you have that base level of anxiety of like, oh my god, I'm gonna be on camera, or were you like a complete natural? This is fine. I know what I'm doing. Let's go.
Oh, I was 100% like, oh, I could not go back and watch my own videos.
Wow.
And then I started being like, oh, what if I did like cute things? And like, there are a couple videos where I'm wearing like hyena ears and flowers and stuff. And there's one where like, I went through a phase where I bleached my hair so I could dye it green. There's several videos where I'm blonde, and I'll see that and go, I was blonde. But no, I didn't like being in front of the camera, and I couldn't go back and watch my own videos for context. And then I was like, okay, well, I have to get past this. Let me try dressing up. And then I hated putting in the effort for dressing up. And now I'm just like, this is how I look. I'm okay with that. This is how I sound. And I'm mostly okay with that. And sometimes I'll like mediate my voice a little bit, but posting on TikTok has made my self-image way better. I'm way happier. Yeah, 100%. Because I was forced to look at myself. I had to edit these videos, and I had to listen to my voice. And I went from, I don't want to hear myself, I don't want to participate in any of this, to I'm happy with the way I look. I'm mostly okay with how I sound. This is great. I don't need to be bothered by this. Which, if I'm not bothered by this, I don't care if somebody comments on it.
Okay.
Because that was my fear. I was terrified that someone's going to comment on it. And when it happened, I made fun of them, and it was fun.
So, how do you, speaking of make fun of them and like when that happened, how do you deal with the toxicity that comes with TikTok? Because TikTok is very unique, and especially in the comment sections, and absolute toxicity from random people on a regular basis. How do you deal with that?
So the first thing I did when I started to really engage with this was I tried like trolling them back and stuff like that, and that was tiring and whatnot. And so I set some rules for myself. The first rule is I don't care what they say to me. Right. I don't care what they say to me. If they engage with somebody in my comment section and they start insulting them, I'm just going to delete their comment. I'm upfront. I will warn them, hey, do not insult this person. You've already done it once. I will block you if you continue. Right. And I hold my like neutrals and whatnot to a somewhat of similar value of like, guys, don't start fights.
Right.
That was the first step of setting rules for my comment section of like, and I had to deal with that recently. Is someone was engaging with me, and then they started to spill over to people in my comment section and was just getting rancid, and I went nope, and I blocked them.
Okay.
And so that's step one. Step two is I try really hard not to like insult things that they can't help. So like their appearance, their intelligence, things like that. Don't do that. And like that was really hard at first because it was really easy to insult someone's intelligence. Like, oh, you're just saying that because you can't be creative. You're not smart. And it just I was like, this isn't. I feel like I'm snooping down to their level. And so it really, as long as someone's not like really. Like, I'll eventually get tired of it, but as long as someone's not, like, really being horrendous and heinous and slinging slurs, I'm going to use them as a teaching moment. Okay. I'm going to be like, hey, guys, this is what you don't say.
Don't do the bad thing.
Yeah, but as long as they're, as the line is slurs and insulting or harassing anybody who follows me or is in good faith trying to engage, because I moderate my comments. I have like 3 words that like I have automatically sorted out that's just mostly for my own annoyance. But like anytime someone comments, I'm always checking to make sure that they're not harassing other people in the comment section, and like that's the main goal.
So what about the people, I don't know if you've ever had this happen, if you had some type of toxicity at not your regular table, but at a table that you've been running, how do you deal with that toxicity at the table when it's happening? Or do you wait till after the game?
So typically, if it's like that kind of area where I think it's a mismatch expectations, where
Mm-hmm.
they're not intending to be toxic, it's just because I try to give when I'm behind the counter, like selling stuff to people, I tend not to give people the best, like good faith. But when I'm running games for people, I will assume good faith, meaning that they're not intending to do this. And so
Right.
99% of the time, I will wait until after the game, and then like, hey, this thing you did wasn't really, why did
Right.
you do it? It doesn't really fit with the table. Were you intending to be like rude with it? If it's like something simple I can fix with a comment of like, hey, this isn't your scene, let's finish this up, then then we can move on to what you're doing, or I'll get to you, in a moment. I will, because typically I don't think most people are trying to be toxic with it. I don't, and I don't think most of the time they're realizing it. And typically I can clock the people with bad intent before they get there, and I tend to run around them to make
Okay.
sure that they
Okay.
can't. And then if it is a problem, we'll have a conversation at the game. I have yet to had to stop a game and ask someone to get up and leave. It has not
Really?
had to happen yet.
Okay. Good.
And I'm very, very lucky for that. But I
Good.
think that's because of how I run games and who I choose to run them for.
Gotcha. Gotcha. What is one of the most important life lessons you've learned from gaming?
Honestly, a lot. This might be really, it's not intended, but honestly, a lot of activism.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
I've learned a lot about activism and doing the right thing, from the gaming and TTRPG
Yeah.
community,
Mm-hmm.
because of like how much of it relates back to how we run games.
Right.
Like the conversation of communication and consent relates to the whole in every relationship. I'm not going to sit down with every friendship and go, here's my consent form.
Right.
But like how we get to those conversations is still valuable and whatnot. And like how to talk about problems at the table is the same way you might talk about how you resolve a conflict between friends.
Mm-hmm.
um how we engage with things at our table like reflects our own world of
Right.
like the heroism and stuff like that. And so in the last 3 years I've learned a lot about activism and doing better with the world and better communication from being participatory in tabletop games in the community.
Awesome. Awesome. Obstacles come and go. They kind of just happen at tables. It happened when you first start learning, playing or DMing. What obstacles have you encountered at your earlier tables?
Between the obvious scheduling problems,
Yeah.
um is my own, like, honestly, like chronic depression. That's
Mm,
like the
mm,
biggest obstacle I have. Is right now I want to run a game, but like the thought of having to make the choices and pick and choose between the
mm-hmm.
people that I can play with on what day to play with gives me such anxiety that I can't bring myself to do it. And
Right.
so the biggest obstacles for me is myself.
Okay.
um like getting a hold of PDFs and learning them. I can get through a PDF. I do like have some problems reading, but I can do it. And so like that's not an obstacle. It's the day-to-day stuff, the
Yeah.
depression and the anxiety. But like once I'm there, once I
Mm,
have that motivation, it's just doing it.
right.
It's the scheduling that becomes the
Right.
problem.
Do you think that gaming, specifically TTRPGs, D&D, Pathfinder, is at some point, or has been at some point, good for your mental health?
100%. I also think it has been bad for my mental health.
Okay. Okay.
In the early years, had a really bad problem with
Mm-hmm.
character bleed,
Okay.
and separating that emotion. Early on in like our longest form campaign,
Mm-hmm.
there was a moment that was really intense for the character that I was playing. She had to come to terms with the fact that the love interest that she had was sacrificing himself, and there was
Mm-hmm.
nothing that she could do, and that was super intense emotionally. And then after that game, I was out for
Right.
like the rest of the day, and I was crying. And then in another game, like another romance interest for my character like led to like this whole emotional, like, not quite a TPK, but it was super
Mm-hmm.
intense and emotional. And so like the character bleed was really bad on me, and I couldn't separate my
Mm-hmm.
emotions from that character. I'm much better at it now.
Okay.
And so 100%, TTRPGs can be very cathartic, very useful for like having a routine each week of like keeping tracking of the day and helping with mental health, and like learning about yourself.
Mhm.
But also on the other hand, just as much, it can be detrimental
Yeah.
because of the character bleed and not being able to separate yourself.
So as a DM, you have to mentally catalog a lot of NPCs in your head.
Mhm.
So how does that character bleed pull over with the NPCs that you have to keep over, or is it more intense as a player?
For me, it's been way more intense as a player.
Right.
Just because like the NPCs, I can take that hat off and put another one. I'm switching between
Yes.
NPCs so quickly. I'm not in that mindset for prolonged periods of times. Even when I'm playing a GM PC, and by the time that I was playing a high emotional, intense GM PC at that point, I'd gotten a lot better at it, at
Okay.
like regulating those two. But even then, I was switching on other characters.
Right.
And so, because I'm not in that mindset solely and for prolonged amounts, it's not nearly as bad. It was really a problem
Yeah.
I had as a player.
Okay.
And it's something I have been working on and continue to try to work on.
Okay. So, what advice would you give someone um, who is trying to get into this content creation, especially in this niche of TTRPGs? What advice would you give them when they're first starting to stream, and this is their niche that they've picked?
Hmm.
What would you say to them? Would you tell them, like, where would you tell them to start, and where would you tell them to continue?
The unfortunate thing is that if you want to be in the business of talking about TTRPGs, you have to talk about D&D.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
There are some who can kind of go without it and not talk about it, but almost every single content creator I've met got started talking about D&D, even if it wasn't in a positive light,
Right.
because that's what gets seen,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start sneaking in the other tabletop games if you want to. And so the first thing I would suggest is to start with be okay talking about D&D,
Mm-hmm.
and or be extremely dedicated to putting in a lot of time and energy into something else,
Yeah.
because you're going to have to do a lot more work if you're not talking about D&D. And then from there, interaction.
Yeah. Right.
There are, especially on TikTok, there are certain things like leave something for somebody to respond to.
Mm-hmm.
Crumbs of something. Sometimes I'll make a video, I'll watch it back and realize that I mismentioned something,
Yes.
and I will just leave it in because that someone might go in and correct me, and then that's a comment. Um, I did a video where I was making a joke about rolling initiative, and I rolled a d12 to see if anybody noticed. I thought it was funny. But like, you have to. The unfortunate thing is with the nature of a lot of things is that you either have to be completely okay being your authentic self,
Mm-hmm.
and getting what interaction you get with your authentic self,
Mm-hmm.
or depending and deciding how much you want to lean into the bait of it all, because that's what gets views, especially on TikTok. You gotta hook them.
Yeah.
You have to say something in like the first 15 seconds that get them to go, wait, what'd you say? And get them to keep watching it. Even if it is I'm gonna argue with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
As much as it annoys me, I'm like, did you watch the whole video? And they're like, no, why
No.
would I?
So, is there a character trait or personality trait or strength that someone needs to work in this industry to be successful?
I have heard people talk about like the skill of like being charismatic or talkative or being able to read the room is like necessary to like either be a GM or make content and stuff like that. And I don't agree with that.
Okay. Okay.
I don't think you need any one character to be in the business. I think you have to be willing to be flexible, willing to be wrong. All of the traits that make you a good GM are what's going to make you a good content creator. Dedication, willingness to be wrong, the willingness to change and try something new, communication. Like, these things are things that I have gotten better at.
Okay.
Because I started making TikToks.
Right.
Because I learned how people read things differently. Because when you play with the same people for 8 years, I can read their minds just by looking at their body. I like what face I know exactly what face that was.
Right.
Or like, oh, I know you're gonna love this NPC. Stuff like that. But when you're playing with new people and you're interacting with people you've never met before, strangers on the internet, I've learned so much of what I say and what I intend means nothing if the impact is different.
Different, right?
And so that, I think, is like so key to being a GM and being a content creator, is understanding that concept.
Right.
My intent is not the same as my impact, and sometimes I'm gonna have to walk it back.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes I have to be okay with that was not it. My choice of words here was poor. Let me fix that. Instead of doubling down and being like, no, I'm the
Right.
GM, I'm the boss, I know what's best, or I'm the video maker, I've been doing this for years, and be like, no, you're right, I was wrong, I
My bad.
apologize.
I'm sorry.
And I think that's the thing. Like, one of the things I talk about often and periodically is making a video about, like, this thing I'm talking about in regards to tabletop is also applicable for your job,
Yeah.
for school, for your friend group, for life. And so the things that make us good people, good at doing these things, are the same thing that make, like, you good at content. Like, being charismatic and being able to talk, public speaking, reading a room, those are all great skills to have. You don't need it. You just have to be willing to learn those skills, or being able to adjust yourself without those skills. And so the drive, the will, having will, that's it.
Right.
Just have the will to do it. And sometimes I don't have the will to do it. That's why the Facebook page, dead. Nothing's happening.
Nothing's happening over there.
Twitter, occasionally log in and be like, all right, bye. I just don't have the will to do it. But TikTok, I'm good.
All day. It's my belief that people who stream, whether they are doing TikTok or doing podcasts, whatever social media they choose, that they are untapped, undiscovered producers, directors, actors. Where do you see yourself in these roles, and do you plan on expanding on any of them?
Much like a lot of these questions, if you had asked me 2 years ago, I'd be like, oh yeah, I could be in an actual play, I could be an actor. But the thinking that I've done over the years is like, I can act, I can do these things. But I much prefer the behind the scenes stuff. I like writing. I would love to sit down and help somebody write an actual play and come up with plots. Because, despite the fact that people want to argue left and right about whether these actual plays are scripted or not, they are to an extent. That's how all DMing works to an extent.
Of course.
There are exceptions to the rules. There are some GMs who literally walk in with nothing and have a system that is designed for that. But for the most part, there is writing as part of this. And so I would love to sit down with somebody and create a campaign and watch it get run and see how it goes. And so I'm not really big on the terms for behind the counter the camera stuff, but I would love that. I could see myself writing a campaign setting or writing stuff for an actual play, and assisting with the building of encounters and rule checking and stuff like that. I would love to be the person at the side of the table rule checking things, not actually playing, and be like, on page 55 you will see that the healing action actually does not bring you back to life, so that would be cool. Referencing, researching. I don't know what role that is, but I think that's what I'd like to do. I could see myself doing that.
I like that. So a lot of our TTRPG players, whether they're doing D&D, Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, whatever, tend to be neurodivergent, and when they decide to DM, they go all in and jump in on the deep end. They don't do a piecemeal. It's usually head first, straight dive into the deep end. What piece of advice would you give someone who's doing deep dive TTRPG for the first time as a DM?
Take it slow. Go as hard and as deep as you want to. The moment you realize that you haven't peed in a while, you need to take a break. Set a time. Because I've been there. I have sat here for hours making characters, or going through PicRoomy and making character dolls and stuff like that, or watching videos on the difference between Pathfinder and 2nd edition and 5th edition. I've done those things, and it's that's part of the fun. And so if you're having fun with it, just make sure you pee, that kind of stuff. Take care of yourself. But there are some people who feel that that's the expectation, and
Okay.
it's not. You can run any tabletop with any baseline amount of rule knowledge
Mm-hmm.
as long as everybody at the table has agreed to it, like,
Right. Right.
or is willing to help. Like, I didn't start playing 5th edition knowing all the rules.
Mm-hmm.
We started playing Pathfinder 2nd edition the second it came into playtesting. There was no way.
Right.
And
Right.
so part of playing is the learning process. And if you feel like the expectation of having to know everything
Mm-hmm.
is ruining your fun, don't do that. You don't have to.
Right.
I know that there's the thing in your brain that says you have to have everything ready to go before you can run.
Right.
I have that little thing in my brain too.
Me too.
But for me, it's fun to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun to prep all that stuff, to read all those rules. But the moment it stopped being fun is the moment I'll stop.
Right.
And so, like, the importance is know your limits.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are doing it simply because you feel pressured to, maybe take a step back, do something else, and if you still don't want to do it, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe that system isn't for you. There are smaller systems. There are easy to learn systems. You don't need to go in with the biggest, hardest game
Right.
of them all. Because let's be honest, D&D 5e, the only reason that it is quote-unquote easy to learn is because you can Google it, go into YouTube, and get like 30,000
Yes,
videos that shows you how to play that game.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only reason that makes that game easy
That's
to
it.
learn.
That's it.
And I get it. And so, like, if it's still not clicking, you don't have to do that.
Right.
You can find somebody in a forum somewhere who'll teach you how to play Fate,
Mm-hmm.
or honestly, I think Daggerheart is really good.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
early learn how to play TTRPG.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's got the thing that not Pathfinder, 4th edition was doing with like
Yes.
cards and stuff.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, once Daggerheart's out, I'm like, that's gonna be the one you want to learn with.
That's right.
Just
right.
It's really good for that. And so, like, know your limits
Mm-hmm.
and be okay trying something new if it's not working for you.
Gotcha.
Is my advice.
So, what is one of the biggest influences that most people has never heard of?
So for me, the biggest influence,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, and it's one of those things, like, to me, a lot of people have heard of it, but in
Mhm.
the grand scheme of things, it's Rooster Teeth. It's a media company. In fact, today is their last day existing. They officially shut down at midnight.
No. Okay.
They've made web series like Red vs. Blue and Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
They have had a major impact and influence on my humor.
Okay.
And like the way that I tell stories, because some of their stuff can lean into the dramatics of it all. And so, like, Rooster Teeth, while not being a like TTRPG thing, they did do TTRPG shows. They actually had one called the Stinky Dragon Pod. While they are not strictly tabletop stuff, they have influenced like my comedy and my humor. They had podcasts that like showed me that even experts can fail in their fields. There was a podcast called Black Box Down, that was about airplanes and their accidents. And so it was this big media corporation, and that just has been a part of my life and influenced who I am in such a great way that you can see it in my tabletop games.
Right,
There have
right.
been times where I've been watching their stuff and been like, oh, I could do that. That's interesting. I could turn that into a tabletop moment. Or listening to a podcast and go, oh man, this guy was an expert, knew this plane inside and out, and still panicked. That's good to know.
That's good to know. I'll put that in my back pocket. Thank you. So you said you've played pretty much all versions of D&D. Which has been your favorite so far?
I played 5th edition for the longest, and then 2nd edition. I really liked 2nd edition for all the books.
Yes.
Just the number of so many splat books. They're like
so many.
The guy that I played with, who I grew up playing with his family, just had walls of like 2nd edition books. Like, if I wanted to be a rogue, I had an entire book on being a rogue.
Right,
if I wanted to be a druid, I had an entire book on being a druid. And that was really cool. I'm not a kid anymore, and that's not nearly as neat. that's just a lot of money.
It's just a lot of money and a lot of books. You like I
A
have
lot
so
of
many
reading.
books. You like,
Um,
do I have time for this?
Second edition, advanced edition will always have a special place in my heart for the nostalgia factor.
Mhm.
Um, the very little I played of fourth edition, looking back at it, at the time I was like, "This isn't D&D. This is the worst. What the heck? This is just an MMO." But like looking back, that was just me being like, "Oh, this isn't. I play real D&D." Because that's what it was. I was playing with a group of friends in high school, and I was like, "Ha, I'm the one who's been playing D&D since she was 8." And that it was
I
just
know
it
more
was
than you. Yeah.
I know more than you, and it's like, here's fourth edition. I'm like, what is this nonsense? This isn't D&D. But like looking back, the system was good. It was a
Yeah.
good system. It really did lean into like the roles, which a lot of people want to do. They want to. I want to play the healer. I want to play DPS. I want to play tank. It really leaned into that, and like, I kind of wish I had played it more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know fifth edition like the back of my hand. I could
I think
probably
everyone does.
yeah, I could probably play second edition, though it might take me a little while to make the character. But I think fourth edition was a good system.
So
I think if it hadn't been marketed under Dungeons and Dragons, it would have done fine.
I am a fourth edition person. I came in on 3.5. It was not the greatest table that I joined in on, and then almost a few months after 4E came out, and no one knew it. Most people hated it, and I was just like, "This is great!" you know,
This thing's amazing.
This thing's amazing, especially for I think for a DM specifically. I mean, I get why players don't like it, but for a DM, the way things are laid out, I think it's immaculate. That's how I feel.
And see, I only experienced it as a player, and like as a player, I was a little like, oh, my cards.
Right.
But like as an adult and those memories, then I'm like, it's actually really good.
Yeah.
It makes it that's easy to teach people. And if you just use this card 3 times a day, that's good.
That's so good. Exactly.
And I think that's why I really kind of like what Daggerheart is doing, like the playtesting I've been doing with that. I'm like, this feels like 4th edition.
See, now I have to look into Daggerheart. Okay, note to self: look into Daggerheart. I'll do that tomorrow. Other than D&D, other than Pathfinder, what other TTRPGs do you enjoy playing?
Currently right now I have a game where I'm playing the modifius Fallout 2D20 system. That is a lot of fun if you want a game, a tabletop game that literally feels like the Fallout games.
Right.
That's really fun. For sci-fi, I love Stars Without Number. It's so good. I didn't really play a whole lot of it from like the GM side, but from a player aspect and the way that my GM ran. He says he ran it exactly how it was intended to be run and like how things are made. It's such a good vibe. If you're like looking for a system that emulates like the Han Solo on a spaceship going from place to place, or like Firefly, that's the way to go. That's a really great system for it. It's just the space exploration is great. Their character creation is amazing. It just Stars Without Number like is that tabletop that I don't play a whole lot, but like sits on the back of my mind and being like, I could go back to that. I could play that. The Genesis system.
Oh, okay.
The Genesis system is based originally off the Star Wars Fireflight game, which I think is now Edge of the Empire. And it used specialized dice, and it turned a lot of people off because of those specialized dice. But I think it is the best dice system I've ever. You could just take the dice and play a whole game with no other rules and just roll the dice. Because of the way it does the dice pools. And how it does the success system. It just, while Stars Without Number, the whole system has my heart.
Right.
And I'm not even a sci-fi person. I'm okay with it, but I love Stars Without Number. The Genesis dice system, I'm always like, I could make my own game with these. There's just there's a whole system around them and making characters and using them. But just how their dice system works is so clean, and it encourages you to describe your actions based on the results, which is what I love to do. I don't like describing what I do before the roll.
Right.
I like describing what I do after the roll based on the results. And so that's what the Genesis system encourages you to do with its like
Mm.
tiered successes. Like it's like something good can happen, but something bad
Mhm.
happens as well, or something good happens and this extra thing, or something bad happens but you still get what you need, or
Okay.
something really bad happens, and like you
Mhm.
can use that to throw forward to other players that you're like, an example is like, say you're in a space gunfight,
Mhm.
and you miss your shot, but you do get a positive outcome that
Oh,
you can
cool.
share with another player. Say you describe your shot as missing, but you hit like uh, a container of flour and it poofs into the air.
Oh,
That makes it
nice.
harder for the opponent to hit.
I like
And
that.
so
That's
it
cool.
really encourages those kind of descriptions. And
I
so
like
like the
that.
Genesis system,
Mhm.
I think that might be it. Like,
So you're in a
but
unique position because you work in a gaming store. So because you work in a gaming store, um, do you find that you want to play everything, and you find all these new and creative things that have been come out that you just want to play because they're so good?
So, I actually I have these experiences got me that job. My
Okay.
willingness, my knowledge of all of these tabletop
Mhm.
games got me the job.
Oh,
I
cool.
basically pitched myself as, you have like Magic guys and Warhammer guys. Let
Mhm.
me be your tabletop person. Let me
Ooh.
be the person who sells tabletops in your store.
Mhm.
I will learn all this other stuff. I even said that I was like, I kind of learning Magic now, and I'd rather work behind the counter than like just show up.
Right.
But like, let me be your TTRPG expert.
Mhm.
Let me sell these things. And so I had that desire even before I got my job.
Okay. Okay.
And I used that to get it. And it honestly, again, I get a lot of who I am as a GM, I get from
Mhm.
my GM. And like when we were running our long form campaign, he'd be like, okay, we're gonna take a break and we're gonna play Fate. Okay, we're gonna take a break and we're gonna play the Dragon Age Inquisition
Ooh,
system.
cool.
We ran we ran a dream sequence
Mhm.
for our main campaign in Fate
Mhm.
just to take a break. We played all of our characters exactly as they are in
Mhm.
Fate, in a dream sequence in like a high school setting.
Right.
And so I started learning all these different systems because my GM was a GM who was brought up on different systems. He didn't start with Dungeons and Dragons. I think he started with Shadowrun.
Okay.
And so like I do find myself wanting to try all these new systems out. Right now we're
Mhm.
looking at Morkborg and
Okay.
wanting to try that out and run a mini campaign or a game or two in that.
Mhm.
And that has expanded into wargaming of like I'm trying out new wargamings. And
Mhm.
so I do want to consume as much as possible, try all these new systems. And that is what allows me to do my job.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Awesome. So outside of all the TTRPG, outside of the store and everything else that you do, what other pastimes do you enjoy doing?
Um so before this, I was painting miniatures, which I guess technically is kind of related. I have birds.
Okay. Okay.
I have a a fondness for birds.
Mhm.
I enjoy listening to like audio podcasts.
Mhm.
Uh, it's kind of hard to answer the question because almost everything I do kind of relates
Kind of
back to
relates
my
back to
job.
yeah.
Oh, I play Magic the Gathering. Wait, nope, that's my
that's
job
that's
again. I
that's your
paint
job.
miniatures. Nope, that's my job again. And so I'm really lucky to have that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I play Magic the Gathering.
Mhm.
And that was the excuse. I was like, look, boss, the reason I'm applying for this job is because I'm too scared to sit down at a bunch of randos. But if I
Mhm.
work behind the counter, I'll get to know them that way, and then I
Exactly.
can sit down and
And
play with
much
them. And he was like, that's smart. You got it.
I
I was
haven't
like,
played
yes.
Magic the Gathering in years, in like
And
forever.
so like I'm learning Magic the Gathering. I'm learning there are so many other trading card games. I'm like
Right.
Digimon's a trading card game, so I'm learning that.
Mhm.
Uh right now the big focus is trading card games
Mhm.
and miniature war games
Mhm.
outside of um like TTRPGs.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And they're kind of tangential. I also like collecting not necessarily tarot cards, but like
Mhm.
tarot themed decks for role playing games or
Okay.
like role playing games with cards based in them.
Well,
I
that's a
like
good idea.
collecting those
Okay.
unrelated to playing. Like I will just buy them
Just
for that
because.
fact.
Oh, that
Yeah.
sounds so cool. Okay. Rules is written or rule of cool, and
Oh,
why?
rules is written all the way,
Really?
100%. I'm a rules is written person. That doesn't mean I don't engage in rule of cool. It just
Okay.
means that I have trust issues because some DMs will roll a cool anything,
Yeah.
and they were like, you get shot with a bow, and it's like, oh, can I use my reaction to throw it back at them? Oh yeah,
Okay.
sure, go ahead. And it's like, you are the fighter, not the monk. What are you doing?
What are you doing?
And it's just I just prefer to run rules as written.
Mhm.
But I'm okay with rule of cool. I just rules as written, it's so much easier, and it puts everybody on the same playing field.
Okay.
And to me that's important, being on the same playing field. That doesn't mean I won't hand wave stuff or rule of cool. I feel like, yeah, you can do that. But just as the default, when I run games for the first time, rules is written.
Okay.
If there's a rule that says you can't do that, unfortunately, you can't do that.
Right.
Yeah, like, let's find another way to do it.
Yeah, usually, like, if someone describes something to me that's super cool, like it sounds freaking amazing,
Yeah.
I'll let them roll for it to see. I'll set the DC, I'll let them roll for it. So, like, there's not a specific rule for that thing, where it's not written down anyway. I'll just be like, well, you know what, the DC is this. If you meet that DC, I'll let you do the thing. Whatever it is, like, you know. But that's as far as I go as hand waving type of stuff.
Yeah, like,
You know.
in D&D 5e is kind of made, not, I wouldn't say it was intendedly made for that, but we as a community play D&D 5e that way.
Yes.
Which is why I don't play D&D 5e. It's why I play systems with hard, concrete, hard and fast rules, very clear defined things, because they make me feel safe, and it's like a little blanket of, like, I don't have to worry that I'm going to make up or improv this rule wrong, because, oh look, it's here on page 255 on paragraph 6.
Okay, so on page 255 on paragraph 6, I'm quite sure it doesn't say I want to, like, somersault into the air, backflip off the tree and land on the back of the dragon, and then I'm gonna take my dagger and punch it into his basal ganglia. Dude, if you tell me something that cool.
And see, there are systems that wants you to describe your stuff that way. I wish I can remember, but there's a system that is, the better you describe it, the more dice you get to roll.
Oh, really?
I wish I could remember the system, but there's a system that does that. It's super, like, high cinematic, super kung fu movie kind of esque thing, where the cooler your description is, the more dice you get to roll.
Oh, that sounds about. If you remember,
let
me know.
I will look it up after this and see if I can remember it.
Okay. So, if you could DM for anyone, dead or alive, real or fiction, up to 5 or 6 players, who would it be?
The first person I'd like to DM for is myself at age 14.
Oh, cool.
I think at age 14, I would hate running for myself at age 14, but I think myself would have a blast. So that's person number one. The answer to the question of what the previous system I was talking about that lets you roll more dice is Exalted.
Exalted, I see that shit, yeah.
But myself, at a younger age, I would like to run for a couple people from Rooster Teeth, just because I've looked up to them. I don't want to say they've raised me, but I've been watching them since I was a teenager. So, like, Gus Arola from Rooster Teeth, I would love to run for. I would like to have John and Martin from the Magnus Archive as a set of players, and, like, the in-between phase of, like, the end-game stuff later on in the season. It's a horror podcast. It's one I really like, but, like, them playing together, one is a lot more outgoing, the other is really cynic, and I think having them at the table playing would be really fun. And then, honestly, like, I mean, it's kind of a silly answer, but, like, I'd eventually like to run for people I know through TikTok. It's getting the gumption to do it, but, like, but, like, running for myself at a younger age, Gus Arola from Rooster Teeth, and then those two characters from that horror podcast, putting them in a game. I think running them through Call of Cthulhu would be fun, because the two from the horror podcast would be like, is this all you got? This is nothing.
It's not scary. What do you mean scary?
This isn't scary.
Like,
and then
not scary.
And then little me would be like, oh, I like horror, because I learned that I enjoy gothic horror settings.
Right.
And, like, 14, I'd be like, I found something new that I enjoy.
Like,
and so, like, I think that would be cool.
Angry Meeple asked about an hour ago, what is a concept you've never been able to make work in a game, and what is your white whale when it comes to executable ideas?
One of the things that I've mulled around in my head on how to execute is like visions of the future.
Okay.
And like giving a vision of the future. Like I've played in games where my GM has executed them well within a system that like
Mm-hmm.
tells you kind of how to do it, but like in a system where I can accurately have a player get a vague vision of something
Mm-hmm.
and then follow through on it within the style that I play, it's not feasible
Okay.
because of how much free reign, I guess. I railroad on occasion,
Okay.
but to get them to fulfill a vision that they see, I have to do a lot more railroading that I want to and that my
Okay.
players would be comfortable with. And so like executing visions of the future. I've played in games and have used where visions of the future were something that was played out and then we
Mm-hmm.
rewind and then play again.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done things where we played through a memory that was altered
Mm-hmm.
and then revealed that that memory was altered,
Oh,
and then
cool.
they have to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never been able to give them a vision to like prophesy something
Right.
and then play out getting to that vision.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
so that's the one thing like I just can't wrap my head around on how to accomplish in a way that I like.
Right. Right.
So I just don't do it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, Angry Meeple again. I love Meeple. Recommendations from your Appendix N.
My appendix in.
Yeah, I don't know the context.
Guess just like just tabletop
I guess
recommendations
so.
or um I recommend everybody play a game of Fate just because the way that
Mm-hmm.
it forces you to sit down and think about character
Mm-hmm.
aspects. It's definitely not a game for everybody because of how loosey goosey the rules are. It
Okay.
very simple rules, but
Mm-hmm.
like the character creation process gets you really thinking about characters and how they use and function, like the way their aspects work. So you have to like think of something um like cool guy as an
Right.
aspect. It's like how do you use that in game and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And additionally, the fate token of like a player being able to expend a fate token to affect the world of like, hey, I'm going to expend a fate token so that this guard that's on watch has to go to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to take away from the stuff from fate that it has and
Mm-hmm.
applying to other system, I think is good for people.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and you can do that with any system, but I think fate has the most that you can pick and plug from and apply to other games.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, he says that Appendix N is the fiction list that inspired the original D&D worlds. It was in the back of the first three editions of D&D. So I didn't read the first three editions because 3. Because 4E is best.
Mhm. So, in regards to like the books, I don't read cover to cover.
right.
I rules reference.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm making character, I only look at the stuff that pertains to making the character. If I'm looking at spells, I only look at those things. So I've never read end to end. And other than Curse of Strahd, I don't play in Forgotten Realms settings.
Okay. Okay.
Even with Curse of Strahd, hit that Barovia setting,
Mm-hmm.
I yoinked and just put in my own setting,
Oh,
like
cool.
as
Okay.
is.
That's awesome.
Um, like, and I've read like some of the Dritz Duorden stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I've played Baldur's Gate, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that stuff doesn't quite impact what I do. If
Right.
anything, it's like it's all high fantasy,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's typically what I run, and so like it just gives me ideas in that way, but not necessarily like, oh, I really like the the panther and having the like the I don't even remember enough about Dritz to like use him as an
Right.
example.
Right. um, Angry Meeple again. Red team or blue team?
I like Red Team.
Okay.
I there's one character from Blue Team that I'm like Tucker is like my favorite character, but
Mm-hmm.
as a team, Red Team 100%.
100%. Okay. Okay. Well, um, while we wait for more questions to come in, if they do, tell everyone what we can expect from you in the future, either on TikTok, maybe here on Twitch, hopefully somewhere else, um, whatever it may be.
So you can find me on almost all social medias under the Laughing Hound. But you're mostly going to find me on TikTok. I might post some pictures on Instagram of some models that I'm painting, but they'll also end up on TikTok.
Hmm.
Um, if I end up on Twitch, I will probably be streaming games. My favorite game is Hunt Showdown, and so
Okay.
you might see me streaming that. I do occasionally edit videos and post them on YouTube, again under the same tag.
Hmm.
But those are like once every 4 months kind of thing.
Right, right.
It really is. If right now, like work,
Hmm.
like being part of the store, working in a local game shop is a lot more like fulfilling and fun than I thought it was going to be. I
Yeah.
thought I was honest. I thought I was going to hate it. I was really worried it was going to make me hate things.
Ooh, okay.
Um, and it hasn't. It's only increased my joy for it. And because I work in a game shop, I work nights, and that's when
Yes.
most people do things. Most people are like, "Hey, you want to be in my actual play?" I'm like, "Yeah, when is it?" And they're like, "Wednesday night." And I'm like, "I work Wednesday night." What about Sunday night? Nope,
Nope,
work
work
Sunday
Sunday
night.
night. uh,
What
quick question
about?
though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question though. You mentioned live play, but I had meant to ask and I kind of skipped over it. Critical Role, Dimension 20, are these live play any of your favorites? Do you watch them regularly?
I in fact do. I will go through phases of just binge watching everything I've missed from Critical Role.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Dimension 20 intermittently.
Okay.
Like especially if like the reactions of everybody around me are like, "Oh my god, did you see the Dimension 20 like the Fae stuff?" Like when Bria ran the Court of Fae,
Mm-hmm.
amazing. I love that. I kept up with that one.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I don't always mesh well with a lot of what Dimension 20 does. Like with
Okay.
fantasy, I like it. I like a 90% of it, but what
Mm-hmm.
I don't like in high amounts, and it keeps me from wanting to go back and pay their
Right,
subscription.
right.
But I do watch. I keep up with Critical Role, but less of like watching it for the tabletop aspect,
Mm-hmm.
and because I that is my least favorite part. I don't like watching people interact with rules
Mm-hmm.
because they don't interact with rules the way I do, and so I sneak past all of that, catch the
Okay.
points that are important, and watch like as if I'm watching an audio podcast.
Okay.
And so yeah, I do and get like watch Critical Role and stuff. I again when like Rooster Teeth when they had their stuff, I watched those
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Do you watch any ones that are less known? I know a bunch of them, like I know
Hmm.
the Players Keep. People on here know Viva La Dirt League with Robert Hartley. I know there's a bunch of other ones. Forge of Lore. All these guys I know. But do you watch anyone that people don't know?
Um, let's see. There's like the Transplaner.
Mm-hmm.
They've had Erica Ishii on Transplaner.
Mm-hmm.
I pop in and watch those occasionally. There's Trans Tales, with like Wow That's Ian, and I watch them occasionally. Basically, if any of my mutuals are in one,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
will watch them as often as I can
Okay. Okay.
and pop in and do that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I'm if anybody's like, hey, I'm a small time creator and I'm trying to do something, and I'm like, give me your connection. I can't guarantee you I'm gonna watch 100% of it,
Right. Right.
but I will at least like follow you and engage with all your videos.
Gotcha. And she does, and they do. Riley will engage, like especially on my
I, I
TikTok.
I try really hard. I
I
can't
love it.
always. Sometimes I don't know like the best way to comment engage of like I'm gonna
Right.
make this silly joke. Maybe that joke won't land, but I will 100% repost and like
Yes,
if you're like,
reposting and like is
can you
sometimes
help?
the best thing you can do. Thank you for hanging out. This was a lot of
Mhm.
fun. I really appreciate you coming on. You're an amazing guest.